Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we will be in Acts chapter 7, 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 1 through 51. Solomon took 13 years to build his palace. He named it the Palace of the Lebanon Forest. It was 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. It had 4 rows of cedar pillars and cedar beams above the pillars. The roof above the beams, supported by the pillars, was also made of cedar. There were 45 beams, 15 per row. There were 3 rows of windows arranged in sets of 3. All of the entrances were rectangular in shape, and they were arranged in sets of 3. He made a colonnade 75 feet long and 45 feet wide. There was a porch in front of this, and pillars and a roof in front of the porch. He also made a throne room, called the Hall of Judgment, where he made judicial decisions. It was paneled with cedar from the floor to the rafters. The palace where he lived was constructed in a similar way. He also constructed a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. All of these were built with the best stones, chiseled to the right size and cut with a saw on all sides, from the foundation to the edge of the roof, and from the outside to the great courtyard. The foundation was made of large valuable stones, measuring either 15 feet or 12 feet. Above the foundation, the best stones, chiseled to the right size, were used along with cedar. Around the great courtyard were 3 rows of chiseled stones, and 1 row of cedar beams, like the inner courtyard of the Lord's temple and the hall of the palace. King Solomon sent for Hiram of Tyre. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a craftsman in bronze from Tyre. He had the skill and knowledge to make all kinds of works of bronze. He reported to King Solomon and did all the work he was assigned. He fashioned 2 bronze pillars. Each pillar was 27 feet high and 18 feet in circumference. He made 2 bronze tops for the pillars. Each was 7.5 feet high. The lattice work on the tops of the pillars was adorned with ornamental wreaths and chains. The top of each pillar had 7 groupings of ornaments. When he made the pillars, they were 2 rows of pomegranate-shaped ornaments around the lattice work, covering the top of each pillar. The tops of the 2 pillars and the porch were shaped like lilies and were 6 feet high. On the top of each pillar, right above the bulge beside the latticework, there were 200 pomegranate-shaped ornaments arranged in rows all the way around. He set up the pillars on the porch in front of the main hall. He erected 1 pillar on the right side and called it Jachin. He erected the other pillar on the left side and called it Boaz. The tops of the pillars were shaped like lilies, so the construction of the pillars was completed. He also made the large bronze basin called the Sea. It measured 15 feet from rim to rim, was circular in shape, and stood 7.5 feet high. Its circumference was 45 feet. Under the rim, all the way around it, were round ornaments arranged in settings 15 feet long. The ornaments were in 2 rows and had been cast with the sea. The sea stood on top of 12 bowls. 3 faced northward, 3 westward, 3 southward, and 3 eastward. The sea was placed on top of them, and they all faced outward. It was 4 fingers thick, and its rim was like that of a cup shaped like a lily blossom. It could hold about 12,000 gallons. He also made 10 bronze movable stands. Each stand was 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 4.5 feet high. The stands were constructed with frames between the joints. On these frames and joints were ornamental lions, bulls, and cherubs. Under the lions and bulls were decorative wreaths. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles and 4 supports. Under the basin, the supports were fashioned on each side with wreaths. Inside the stand was a round opening that was 1.5 feet deep. It had a support that was 2 1/4 feet long. On the edge of the opening were carvings in square frames. The 4 wheels were under the frames, and the crossbars of the axles were connected to the stand. Each wheel was 2 1/4 feet high. The wheels were constructed like chariot wheels. Their crossbars, rims, spokes, and hubs were made of cast metal. Each stand had 4 supports, one per side projecting out from the stand. On top of each stand was a round opening 3/4 of a foot deep. There were also supports and frames on top of the stands. He engraved ornamental cherubs, lions, and palm trees on the plates of the supports, and frames wherever there was room, with wreaths all around. He made the 10 stands in this way. All of them were cast in one mold, and were identical in measurement and shape. He also made 10 bronze basins, each of which could hold about 240 gallons. Each basin was 6 feet in diameter. There was one basin for each stand. He put 5 basins on the south side of the temple, and 5 on the north side. He put the sea on the south side, in the southeast corner. Hiram also made basins, shovels, and bowls. He finished all the work on the Lord's temple he had been assigned by King Solomon. He made the 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped tops of the pillars, the lattice work for the bowl-shaped tops of the 2 pillars, the 400 pomegranate-shaped ornaments for the lattice work, for the bowl-shaped tops of the 2 pillars, the 400 pomegranate-shaped ornaments for the lattice work of the 2 pillars. Each lattice work had 2 rows of these ornaments at the bowl-shaped top of the pillar. The 10 movable stands with their 10 basins, the big bronze basin called the sea with its 12 bowls underneath, and the pots, shovels, and bowls. All these items King Solomon assigned Hiram to make for the Lord's temple were made from polished bronze. The king had them cast in earth foundries in the region of Jordan between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all these items unweighed. There were so many of them that they did not weigh the bronze. Solomon also made all these items for the Lord's temple: the gold altar, the gold table on which was kept the bread of the presence, the pure gold stands at the entrance to the inner sanctuary, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, the gold flower-shaped ornaments, lamps, and tongs, the pure gold bowls, trimming shears, basins, pans, and censers, and the gold door sockets for the inner sanctuary, the most holy place, and for the doors of the main hall of the temple. When King Solomon finished constructing the Lord's temple, he put the holy items that belonged to his father David, the silver, gold, and other articles, in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. Yeah. So, following the construction of the temple of the Lord, you have, I guess, Solomon building his palace, and it taking 13 years to do so. The dimensions are given for his palace there. And you have King Solomon sending to King Hiram of Tyre and having him make many of the vessels for use in the temple, including these pillars, this thing known as the sea, which served as something of a reservoir for the temple complex, holding many thousands of gallons. The ornamentation on the pillars, these carts that you could wheel around the temple complex and use as part of the sacrificial rites there, tongs and shovels and bowls and all sorts of ornamentation. And such a huge amount of bronze was used in the construction of these things that it was left unweighed, because it would have been a lot. Especially this these bronze pillars here, which were 18 feet in circumference, which that's something like 6 feet in diameter, which is crazy huge. 27 feet high, 6 feet in diameter. Yeah. Let's see here. From Guzik. Solomon took 13 years to build his own house. 1 Kings 6:38 tells us that Solomon spent 7 years building the temple, but here we learn that he spent 13 years building his own house. The temple was glorious, but it seems that Solomon wanted a house that was more glorious than the temple. It does show the place which his own personal comfort and luxurious tastes had come to occupy in the life of Solomon. It is often by such simple and unexpected tests that the deepest facts of a human life are revealed. For Morgan. We could say that Solomon finished the work of building the temple. The Christian cannot say that the work of spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ is finished. So he finished all his house. The following passage describes what a magnificent house Solomon had. The house of the forest of Lebanon. So much magnificent cedar wood from Lebanon was used to build Solomon's palace that they called it the house of the forest of Lebanon. Walking in the richly paneled walls of the palace was like walking in a forest. The 45 pillars set in the house of the forest of Lebanon also gave the impression of being in a majestic forest. 45 pillars. Took a good portion of the forest to make the house. 1 Kings 10, 16, and 17 mentions 500 gold shields that were hung in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Isaiah specifically called this building an armory in Isaiah 22:8. So, probably morphed a little bit in its usage post-Solomon. So were the inner court of the house of the Lord. At the end of the detailed, magnificent description of Solomon's palace, the writer also mentioned that some of the great architectural features of the palace were also used in the house of the Lord. We are left with the idea that as great as the temple was, Solomon's palace was better. When one travels in old Europe today, you often come to magnificent cathedrals. These amazing buildings were mostly built hundreds of years ago at great labor and cost to poor people who could never dream of living in such spectacular places. When their most magnificent buildings were churches, it said something about their values. When Solomon made his palace more spectacular than the temple, it said something about his values. Our most magnificent buildings in the modern world, usually given over to business, shopping, or entertainment, say something about our values. Haggai 1 verses 3 through 10 speaks powerfully to those who think more about their house than they do the house of God. Huram from Tyre. This man was half Israeli and half Gentile, and he was the best craftsman around. Solomon hired him to do all his work, that is, the fine artistic work of the palace, and especially the temple. Oh, interesting. It's Huram. The NET has it as Hiram. So it's the same name as that king. He cast 2 pillars of bronze. These impressive pillars were actually so noteworthy that they were given names. They were called Jachin and Boaz. The one on the right was given the name Jachin, meaning he shall establish, and on the one on the left, the name Boaz, meaning in strength, from Dildé. In practical terms, the pillars were to be an ever-present reminder to each successive king of the fact that he was ruling by God's appointment and by his grace, and that in God lay his strength. Just so ought believers today to be ever mindful of God's grace in their lives and their utter dependence on him. Some believe that the pillars were meant to remind Israel of the twin pillars from the Exodus. The pillar of fire by night and the pillar of cloud by day were constant reminders of the presence of God in the wilderness. Every time someone came to the house of the Lord in the days of Solomon, they said, "Look, there is, he shall establish, and there is, in him is strength." This set them in the right frame of mind to worship the Lord. And when the crowds gathered at the morning and evening sacrifice to worship the Lord, the Levites led the people, standing in front of the temple with these 2 great bronze pillars behind them. It was always before them, "He shall establish, and in him is strength." One could say that the house of God itself was Jachin and Boaz. That temple was established by God and built by the strength of God. Every time they looked at that temple, they knew that God liked to establish and strengthen things. The house of God was a place where people experienced what the pillars were all about. At that house, people were established in their relationship with God. At that house, people were given strength from the Lord. From this building, it should go out to the whole community. Come here and get established. Come here and receive the strength of God. He made the sea of cast bronze, 10 cubits from one brim to the other. The huge laver was more than 15 feet across, and was used for the ceremonial washings connected with the temple. In addition, Huram made 10 lavers of bronze. Each laver contained 40 baths. It was used by priests for cleaning their hands and feet, and perhaps also to supply water to the standing basins for the rinsing of offerings. From Wiseman. Poole believes that perhaps water came out of the bowls that formed the foundation of the sea. The volume of the sea was 2,000 baths, generally calculated to be about 11,500 gallons, from Patterson and Austell. The table of gold on which was the showbread. 2 Chronicles 4:8 says there were 10 tables of showbread. Here they are described collectively as a unit. He put them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord. All these great works of art and articles of great value were placed in the temple. This included the ten carts and the shovels, bowls, and other needed utensils for sacrifices. And Solomon brought in the things which his father David had dedicated. God told David that he could not build the temple, but David still collected furnishings and treasures for the temple that his son Solomon would build. Okay. Well, shorter one today, but I think this one highlights the importance of doing our work well for the Lord. Solomon certainly spared no expense in the construction of the Lord's temple, and I think that should serve as an example to us that whatever we do, we should work at it with all our heart, as if working for the Lord and not for men. Yeah. Anyhow, hope you have a great day. See ya.